Good afternoon and welcome to the Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. Our guest today is Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank out of Singapore. Vishnu, as always, great to have you on the show.
Always a pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Vishnu, before we get your insights, let's take a look at how first crypto markets are performing, and then we'll take a quick look around the region and then come back to you. We're going to start with Bitcoin, which is now at a market capitalization of 1.17 trillion. And I said that again, trillion US dollars. Bitcoin is trading at 62,068. It's up 1.76%. Ethereum is at 4,147.50. It's just under the half a trillion mark at 489 billion dollars. And if we look across the region in markets, we have the Nikkei, which is trading at 28,559.37. It's a down 0.85%. The Shanghai Composite is at 3,596.05. It's up 0.38%. The Hang Seng is at 26,150.24. It's up 0.09%. The ASX 200 is at 7,442.7. It's up 0.37%. The Kospi is up 0.37% at 3,017.14. Closer to home, we've got Bursa Malaysia, which is at 1,590.56. It's up 0.16%. And rounding up the numbers, the STI is at 3,201.77. It's down 0.11%. Now, Vishnu, give us an overview of how markets have performed this morning. Hi, Vishnu, I think we kind of lost your audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, Brian. Sorry. Coming back on again, much like the markets.
Okay, yeah. So what's your view on market performance this morning?
Well, I think it is a mixed market, but essentially it is also nervous for a couple of reasons. One of it is, of course, looking ahead at the earnings seasons coming in, and against the backdrop of in concert with high and rising inflation risks. I think markets are taking a little bit of a cautious stance, but primarily it is also got to do with what Fed Jerome Powell said. So he's conceded inflation risks are going to be stickier, and he sees taper coming through, but he says, let's wait before rate hikes. It doesn't mean automatic rate hikes, primarily because he thinks that you need the labor market to heal further. So I think this is really crystallizing for markets, the conundrum of recovery not being full and comprehensive, whereas inflation emerging as a larger risk. And with Q3 US data coming out for GDP, likely to show a slowdown. I think these things are beginning to hit the road. Last but not least, and certainly maybe not even last, the COVID outbreak in China, that's also rattling some nerves in the market over and above the pre-existing China risks in the credit markets.
Okay, and Vishnu, I'm going to take those points separately. The first thing, the inflation risk, and that's also a lot to do. One big factor is the rise of energy prices, and oil prices continue to rise, of course, gas prices as well. What's your view in terms of the momentum moving forward for energy prices?
I feel like I'm back in my physics class. Momentum here probably needs to be dissected. So from mass times velocity here looks like really, gaining quite a bit of, speed, and it's probably going to come in with surprising markets somewhat. A big reason behind, even though we think, the supply, there is a capacity for supply to pick up, but we are entering a winter season where energy demand usually goes up against a backdrop of a pre-existing power crunch in Europe and China. So against this backdrop, it looks like energy prices will be rather elevated, and Brent and WTI may reflect that with a much higher sensitivity. So oil prices could have a lot more upward momentum. We kind of stick to our view that over a 3 to 6 month period, it should come back in. as you get your oil rig starting up again, your shale coming through, OPEC, not just on their own accord, but with pressures building from US. Even India is going to speak to OPEC to ask them to, output a little bit more. And if you take all of this in concert with the fact that there are also signs that demand is wavering a little bit, we should see it settling, but not without creating a little bit of a fuss first.
Now, Vishnu, the other point that you raised is China risks. Now, the COVID risk is an additional risk that has come into play, but then the markets are really concerned about the fact that with all the regulatory risks that have come in China over the last few months, markets haven't actually fully priced its potential impact on the global economy. Do you share that view?
I do. I think I do have a lot of empathy with the view that we may be underestimating the reach of China risks. One example would be if we see a headline that says that Evergrande is not Lehman, point conceded. Yes, it probably isn't a Lehman, but that doesn't mean it cannot create quite a bit of pain, and disproportionately for this region in particular. Couple that with the power crunch, couple that factor that this common prosperity campaign style measures are probably going to last until a good part of the first half of next year before they start stabilizing growth heading into the NPC, means that maybe they may not pull back initially where we expect them to. Let me steal your term, momentum. So even if growth momentum starts subsiding, they may not pull back where we ordinarily think they would. So these are the risks for us. And also ahead of, so there are two aspects to it. One is China or cross region. The other is ahead of NPC if they're going to hold back on opening their borders. All the ASEAN economies hoping for a bit of a lift early next year because of vaccinations as tourism resumes, may have to hold back on optimism because Chinese tourists are not coming in force just yet. So it is still going to be a bumpy and tentative recovery for the first half.
Now, Vishnu, with the start of the week, what should we be looking out in terms of data points and events that could move markets this week?
I think there's a lot to watch this week, and really depending on the headlines, some things could fly under the radar. So we've got US GDP, Q3 GDP coming out. We've got the ECB, we've got the BOJ. So what's going to be really interesting to get a feel of line slowdown in the US against the backdrop of how the ECB is going to handle rising inflation by their inclination to stay dovish. The BOJ, of course, is going to be the most dovish of the G3 central bankers, but even then it is good to realign and reassess and recalibrate our G3 policies. And finally, I think even within the region, we probably are going to keep a keen lookout for Korea GDP data that's coming out tomorrow. That's going to give us a bit of a signal about the chip sector as well as the so-called but a lot of this if it's continued to mount on the front as well power crunch in the red front.
Vishnu, thank you very much for your insights. Unfortunately, we have lost you towards the end. We've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank, at Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video will be on our various social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.